Thank you very much for listening to this week's talk on the Sedra of Korach. And we are dedicating this learning to the safe and speedy release of all of the hostages in Gaza and the safety and success of all of the soldiers in the IDF as they continue their heroic missions to keep the people of Israel and the land of Israel safe. And we are living through exceptional times of open miracles. And as we go towards Rosh Chodesh this week, Thursday and Friday, for the month of Tamuz, that is traditionally associated with the beginning of the 3 weeks on the 17th of Tammuz, a period of mourning and memories of catastrophes that happened over the years to the people of Israel. We really pray that we are turning into a new era, that we are seeing all of these open miracles, and please God, we will learn the right lessons. We will be meritorious to witness the change from a time of mourning to a time of joy and celebrate, please God, the revealed hand of Hashem to the whole world. And really, if we're looking at the lessons of Korach, there are so many messages for us. And thinking of it in terms of the title, All for One and One for All. And this phrase came to my mind as I looked at the opening words of the Sedra. And we see what Korach has to say as he mounts his rebellion against Moshe Rabbeinu. And this is chapter 16 verse 1. Vayikach Korach ben Yitzhar ben Kas ben Levi v'Dosan v'Aviron b'nei Eliav v'On ben Peles b'nei Ruvain. And Korach takes, and just going very quickly to see how he's presenting himself, Rav Lachem, this is what he is saying to Moshe Rabbeinu, it's enough for you. Ki chol ha'eda kulam kadoshim, all of the congregation, all of them are holy. Uvasocham Hashem, and in their midst is Hashem. Umadua tisnasu al kahal Hashem. Why do you raise yourselves up on the congregation of Hashem? And the most dangerous lies have more than a kernel of truth in them. And Korach's words, all of the congregation are holy. This is true. This is words that have been said by Hashem, that we should be a nation of priests to him, a holy nation and a nation of priests. And so Korach is really repeating these words. And looking at the commentary of Rav Yosef Soloveitchik on the Sedra, he points out two types of holiness. He says that there is a Knesset Yisrael, a type of holiness that applies to the whole unit of the congregation of Israel, that is partly inherited from our fathers, and this is something that is innate to the entire nation. And then there is an individual aspect of that Kedusha, that special elevated status, and each one of us has our own particular type and mission, and that is something that is individual to everybody. But Korach is just looking at the communal type of the holiness, about the unit, as the unit as a whole has that special Kedusha. And just linking the ground, the circumstances that enabled this particular assault on Moshe Rabbeinu's and Aaron's leadership as coming from the seeds that were sown in last week's Sedra of Shalach Lecha. When we read about the 12 leaders who were chosen to go on a mission to tour the land of Israel, and 10 of them come back with their versions, their opinions of what they saw, and the lower the morale of the people with their conclusions that we are not strong enough to fight the giants who are living, and we will never manage to do that, and as a result, the decree that generation will die out in the wilderness. the morale was so low, and this is something that was already enabling the Korach to to say the things against Moshe Rabbeinu that would not have been heard of in the previous before this happened. And interesting, looking at the very last section of last week's Sedra, which talks about tzitzis. And we've mentioned before that in the Torah scroll, we have a continuum. So this is the paragraph that talks about tzitzis. And on the very next line, we have Vayikach Korach. We have the opening words of our Sedra. And the Medrash and Tanchuma, quoted by Rashi, picks up on this and says that one of the ploys of Korach was to dress the 250 people that were part of his rebel group and dress them in garments entirely of techeles, which is the blue-purple thread that is meant to be on the individual thread of the fringes of the tzitzis, and says, and they asked this question of Moshe Rabbeinu, this question with an edge, and says, if a garment is made completely of techeles, does it need an individual string of techeles? And Moshe Rabbeinu answers, yes, it does. The Torah says that the strings should have one color, one string of the techeles color. And they ridicule Moshe Rabbeinu with that answer, and they say, how can that be? The entire garment is the color of techeles. Surely it doesn't need the individual thread. And so here I think we can have a metaphor for this idea. The entire garment is techeles. The entire people has this special elevated kedusha, sanctity. We don't need to have one thread of techeles. We don't need to have Moshe Rabbeinu who appoints his brother as Kohen Gadol. We are all able to be leaders. And really, this is the abuse of the concept that the nation as a whole has this complete sanctity. Each one, from the lowest in the nation to the highest in the nation, everybody has that aspect of kedusha. However, the individual capacity that is on each person, that is something that is unique. And Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron were appointed by Hashem. There was never any suggestion that this was they putting themselves forward, usurping positions of leadership. If anything, their unwillingness is documented and stressed, and their scrupulousness in devoting themselves to the people. This is something that shines through, and until the disaster of the report of the opinions of the 10 who went to tour the land, nobody would have successfully challenged Moshe Rabbeinu's leadership. It's just in the residue of that terrible demoralization, Korach was able to put that wedge and make his attack on Moshe Rabbeinu. And really, when we can see in this week's Sedra that this concept of all for one, that Korach was setting himself up as the one. Korach was the one who had the ego, who had this lust for power, who couldn't accept that he had a different role with all of his talents, with all of his intelligence and his wealth. He could have contributed so much, but just not in the role of Moshe Rabbeinu. And this is the message that is something that we can all absorb, that we are, each one of us has this combination of a complete and part of a whole, like the whole tzitzis garment, but equally each one has their own particular contribution. And it's interesting to note that the gematria of tzitzis is 600. And then together with the five knots and the 8 strings, that makes 613. And that is the total. So we are all part of that total, but each one of us has got our own special mission as given by Hashem. And on the one hand, it seems from these conclusions that Moshe is unique and nobody can rise to the levels of Moshe Rabbeinu. But interesting, in Pirkei Avos, Ethics of Our Fathers, and this is chapter 5, Mishnah 22. And for all of us who will go away from this learning and see that actually Moshe is that elevated, can have that elevated position, and none of us can. The Mishnah Pirkei Avos is actually presenting us with the possibility of how we can all rise to our greatest heights. And the Mishnah goes as follows: Kol hamazake es harabim, anyone who brings merits to the many, ein chet ba al yado, no sin will come through him. V'chol hamachati es harabim, and all who causes the many to sin, ein maspikin b'yodo lasos teshuva. There is no possibility for him to do teshuva. Moshe zacha, Moshe merited v'zika es harabim, and caused the many to have merit. Zuchus harabim taloi boy, and the merit of the many depends on him. Shenema, as it says, tzidkas Hashem asa. He did the righteousness of Hashem, or mishpotov im Yisrael, and his ordinances with Israel. And when we see this Mishnah, we say kol hamazakeh, anybody who brings merit to the many. And so, although Moshe Rabbeinu was the leader, was our teacher then and always, but all of us have got this potential to bring zechuyot, to bring merits to the many. Korach could have brought merits to the many. Any one of us can bring merits to the many. And this is something, as we look at these two concepts of Kedusha that Rav Soloveitchik identifies, that we all have an equal measure, part of the collective sanctity, like the entire garment of that houses the tzitzis, yet each of us have our individual capacity as well to bring merit to the many. And that doesn't mean that we need to usurp a position, Moshe Rabbeinu or another leader. It means that we need to work on our mission. We need to channel our circumstances and raise our own levels to the greatest heights and spread that out to the many. And in this way, we are bringing our individual contribution to the whole. And so I think that when we see what all for one and one for all, in this week's Sedra, Moshe Rabbeinu shines as the one who was for all of the people to the greatest lengths. And we can look to Moshe Rabbeinu as our inspiration, as our example, in this week particularly, when he was challenged in such a insidious way, using the very concepts of goodness that underpin the holiness of each individual, and trying to use that as a mechanism to oust the greatest leader of all time. But in the struggle, in the perennial struggle of evil against good, that evil does not prevail. Evil does not prevail in our Sedra. Evil, with God's help, does not prevail in the times that we're living through. Please God, we should all use our individual capacity to raise ourselves, raise those around us, and merit that the fulfillment of our deepest desires, for our prayers to be answered, and the full and final redemption to come speedily and in our time. Thank you very much for listening. Wishing everybody Shabbat Shalom.